All right, welcome to another show, part two with my guy here, Dr. Tommy Stallworth. We got into some good things last time, and I'm excited now to double back around and continue some things that we wanted to talk about. First of all, it's a different day, so how's it going?
Going real good. We're starting summer workouts down here in the state of Georgia with our high school team, and it's a great time because these kids are now on the path for 707 camps, but also chasing their college dreams or attending recruiting and prospect camps. So you love talking to them about the opportunities, the exposures, and just seeing what it's like for them being able to be on those college campuses that we've been on before.
Yeah, that's really good. So something I want to talk about is, and I know you've coached at different levels, been exposed to the professional game, and I'm still passionate about professional sports, especially the NFL and my background and having a little time for the coffee and donut, as they say in the NFL. But I pay attention to the NFL, and I know some people are paying attention to these things, these grades that come out and
Yeah.
these NFLPA grades. And can you explain like exactly what that is, what you think goes into it, and why are we having athletes give grades? I mean, because I'll just tell you this: I was just in a meeting and we're talking about food and dining hall and things like that, and you know how that goes. Athletes always have an opinion about the food, what's happening, and they don't really understand much about service and temperature and all the food prep and the ordering and the cost that goes into all of that. But everyone's got a complaint. So I just have the same concern when athletes are grading strength and conditioning. Like, what is your background? Whether you like, what's your criteria? If you like the strength coach, or if you like the equipment, or if you like the style, or if or if you were challenged enough. Like, I don't get how they have enough information to be able to make judgment and I don't get it. Help me out.
It's funny that you say that, Pat, though, because ultimately that's a system that's not one that's beneficial to the athlete or the coach because there's no opportunity providing one-on-one dialogue. You see the grades, like you said, and the problem with that situation is that you don't find out about an issue until it's then released and becomes public information. And so, it is a little disheartening, but at the same time, you come to realize that ultimately it's a flawed system because as you and I both know about research, there's the different types of research criteria. We're talking about reliability and validity. Well, as a strength coach, we don't even know what's on the survey, let alone do we know how they are really ranking or grading a survey. Then that other thing we talk about on that about research, there's the objective and subjective measures. So when you're going through the research process, like we both have had to do with our doctoral programs and other research studies, there's a thing that you have to do throughout the research process to make sure that you're going to be able to provide adequate and transparent goals. But unfortunately, this system is, again, it's flawed because there is no transparency and it's a flawed data collection process. One of the things that was kind of made known, that was stated about me, was that there was negativity and toxicity. And you know me better. You would not have taken a chance on interviewing me if that was ever in me. But I would also highlight the fact that there can never be a thing of negativity or toxicity without power. And as a strength coach in the NFL, you have no power. Those players are going to come through those doors, are going to be on that roster, whether you like it or not. So it becomes more about creating relationships, having conversations, and having dialogue to be able to educate these players, but also understand them from their training background, their expectations, and trying to help them be the best players possible. So, the survey at the end of the day, I didn't concern myself with the results because as Coach Smith and I would always talk about the objectivity, those facts, our injury numbers, our games missed, our decreased number of non-contact injuries, you could tangibly measure and assess those. But as you brought up the point, a player's feelings, a player's background on training knowledge, a player's program, you can't measure those, let alone when it's anonymous surveys and there's no direct communication between the NFLPA and the people involved with it.
Yeah, for me, I'm concerned because why make that public? Like, what's the purpose of making that public? If the organization and the league wants to know who's doing what, like, are they coming right behind and making some adjustments or encouraging these adjustments to make? And I had a question because I looked at one of the teams that I follow closely, and I know the head coach of this NFL team, and I knew someone who was in the weight room with that coach for a long time, talking about a couple decades. And I'm going, well, if it's that bad, why do they keep winning at that level? Like, I'm confused on this information here and how it's being portrayed, in whether it's the locker room or weight room or the food, because they're looking at all of that, and it's like it is very subjective, and I do question the validity and the reliability of it. But I also know this, with the NFL Combine, I've talked to a friend of mine who's an NFL scout, and says they're not even that concerned with what happens at the NFL Combine. That's more so for viewership, and people are interested in seeing some of their favorite players and how they get out there and compete. But once again, that the network and the finances that are driving that don't necessarily line up with a 40-yard dash and projecting where someone should be drafted. So, for me, it's kind of the same thing. There's that, what is front facing and what's reality and what's publicity and what is someone really trying to do to help a situation. Those are the things that I'm thinking about, and probably spend too much time thinking about them. I don't know.
No, you're not wrong, because it's when you're in leadership positions, we're always trying to not just be forward thinking, but we're problem solvers. And so you can't solve a problem if you're not aware of it or if you don't know it exists. And so when you deal with things like transparency versus anonymity, if there's an issue, then when you're a mature professional, you can own up to it. I've never gone through life and said, I'm perfect, I have all the answers. I know my background in strength conditioning, I know my knowledge base, but we also know that each player is completely different, especially when you're in that NFL sector, when you can be dealing with guys from 20 to 36, 37 years old. There are fundamental movement patterns that ultimately everybody physiologically needs. And so we can't avoid them, but then also we're having to learn about the chronological age versus training age of some of these players. And, so it becomes a rabbit hole that, you can dive deep into. But again, if you're not aware of a problem, you can't solve a problem unless after the fact. And so that's where the transparency of dealing with professional athletes, you would hope would be better. But then when there's the anonymity part, you kind of lose your respect for some of those athletes that choose to operate in that sector, because you know how it is. These players, as NFL players, are no different than college players. They're no different than high school players. At the end of the day, as strength coaches, as performance coaches, we're pushing them because we have to expose their bodies to a level of stress and discomfort that's not only going to elicit growth, but to help them develop in a way that's going to protect them. But if we're going to be pushing someone that's resistant to being pushed and trying to help be made better, then they're always going to have a problem. You know how it is. You can never make a locker room full of players happy in our position. And it's very unfortunate, but there becomes a transition in all of your relationships with players that after a while they realize that ultimately you do have their best interest in mind. And so it's not personal. It's, coach, I appreciate it. You know how it is when that guy, you see him walk in the door and you can see that body language like, okay, today is going to be a fight, but I'm going to help him get through this. I'm not going to let him feel sorry for himself, but I'm going to help him realize that mentally you might not think you can do it, but physically you're more capable than you realize.
See, that gets into something else I want to talk about because now I think we got some crossover here. So I want to hear about your philosophy on sports psychology, mental conditioning, mental performance, whatever you want to call it, and then your PhD. What did you do your PhD in? Was it sports psych or was it exercise science or something else?
No, so my degree is technically a PsyD, or a doctorate of psychology, but it was in sports psychology and sport performance, because what we're dealing with now is with these athletes, and especially professional athletes, is a whole nother level of pressure that any other generation has ever faced because of social media, where these players, and it's not just professional athletes, but I would even say collegiate athletes now, because of the NIL and the popularity that all sports are gaining. No player, nobody on this earth is typically removed or unplugged from their phone longer than 2 minutes. But for these athletes who essentially live through their social media, some of them are taking these comments to heart. And so you're trying to help encourage them and keep them out of that dark space, so we don't go down that rabbit hole of the negativity, the doubt, the lack of self-confidence that has gotten them to this point. Everybody's going to have bad moments. Everybody has bad days, but it's the way that you respond and that support system around you that helps you come out of that can help you block out those things and can provide that reassurance to these players that you are better than what these people say. I know what you do. I know, I've seen how you work. I know what you're capable of, and just constantly pouring into them and reassuring, and not just telling them fluff, but providing them substance by showing them, man, look at what you did today when you thought you couldn't be done, when you weren't feeling a certain way, when somebody said that you couldn't do it. Everybody can't do what you all do, but look at what you did. And so it's that providing, like we talked about earlier, that objective information for them to reassure them and to help that self-confidence.
All right, so you're telling me, so let me remind the people here, you've worked at every level, from high school to college to pro and back down and up and all the way around. Are you saying that, because I'll tell you something I hear, we're paying them a lot of money, so they got to figure it out. Okay, are you telling me that with professional athletes that make a lot of money, that they can't just figure out some of this stuff because, hey, we're paying them a lot of money and that's what you're here for and you got a job to do, so you got to block out those distractions. We're paying you a lot of money. Or college, hey, you got a big NIL deal, you better block that stuff out, you better tune that stuff out because we're paying you a lot of money. So are you saying from a psychological standpoint that a professional athlete who's getting paid a lot of money has difficulty with blocking out distractions, focusing, and limiting the social media? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's so unfortunate because, again, social media is so instantaneous. You can see players after a game, win or lose, when they're on their phone in the locker room and they're passing these comments around, passing their phones, talking to each other. But then, there's the other side of it, that some of these players have their hype engines behind them that are going to put out what the narrative that they want. But again, that hype train can only go so far. There's a public perception about professional athletes and these collegiate athletes that, yes, just because you got money, you're automatically prepared to handle these things. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. these are still humans that you're talking about. These are still young individuals that have to be trained and taught how to navigate these things and are growing up in life. If we're all honest, none of us were properly prepared when we went to college to be on our own at 18, 19 years old. Now, when you talk about walking into that kind of money and you've never had money, that's one thing. But now when you transition from college to the professional ranks, yeah, you might have had an NIL deal, but now when you get this kind of money and you're in these marquee cities, these major cities with major media outlets, that's a different level of scrutiny that most people have no idea about and are really not prepared for.
I want to take this somewhere, and it might be a little dangerous to take it there. So I'm not going to mention the name, but I'm paying attention to one particular professional sport with one particular athlete that's getting a lot of attention. And the perception is, hey, be tough, ignore it, show up, ball out. But there's a lot of dynamics going on with this athlete that's a very good three-point shooter. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, are you paying attention to that? What do you think about that? Because there's some dynamics that are happening, in the pros. Like maybe there's not hazing that goes on, but there's definitely rites of passages that you have to go through. I don't know if they still carry the rookies still carry the vets playbooks and things like that. But there's some things. So talk about some of those things that might happen behind the scenes that people don't know, that is kind of the game behind the game with the players and how they interact with each other and how the vets and rookies, what that dynamic is.
And it's funny when you talk about that dynamic because unfortunately there's a statistic that says 50% of first rounders will sign their second contract with the team that drafted them. So now when you're talking about 50% from an academic standpoint, you would say that could be a fail. However, like you said, there's a different dynamic with these players behind the scenes. And where I'm going with that is that when these players walk into the locker room, first, second, whatever round every year, they don't realize that they're having to start their journey all the way back over. When they got to college, it was trying to earn something. But now when you get to the pros, this is people's livelihood that we're talking about. So that veteran that's in year 7, 8, 9, or even 10 years, he's looking at you. Are you going to come in to be the best pro possible, to be a part of this team and embrace this work? Because this is a full-time job now. There is no, I got study hall, I've got class. These vets are watching these rookies each and every year to see if they're handling their business and are just as invested in this as they are because they've made it to year 8, 9, or 10. At the same time, these vets are watching these rookies knowing that these people are being brought in to take their job. So the vets are going to help, but the vets are also fighting to keep their job as long as possible as well.
So that dynamic, you got this vet, and I remember I was a free agent coming in. This was maybe my 4th year in the league, and I started really working on my long snapping. Trying to do whatever I could to stick around. And I went to the starting long snapper and I said, "Hey, you mind showing me, a few things?" He said, "Yeah, you write me a check." I mean, it was what he asked for back then were probably worth, I don't know, $250,000. You might as well say, "Hey, yeah, you write me a check for $250,000. I'll show you how to long snap." I was like, "What?" It's like, I'll just use my 2 eyes and watch you for free. Like, not paying you any money. But he was like, said, "Why am I going to show you how to take my job?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're right about that. That's a different mindset. Like, yeah, I'll show you, I'll help you, but you're gonna pay me because if I'm gonna show you, you take my job, you might as well go ahead and pay my bills." Like,
absolutely, yeah, and unfortunately there are those type of vets because again, every day is a job interview in that facility for everybody besides the owner. And so when you're a player in that locker room, how you handle yourself in that locker room around those other vets, that you're building your trust, that you're building their trust in you, and they're also assessing whether you are capable of helping them accomplish their goals as well. They have proven that they can do it, hence why they're vets. But there are plenty of rookies who come in and think, oh, I've made it to the NFL. Well, getting to the NFL is just a step. Now the goal is to stick and make it. And so that's where you have some quality veterans who will take the time to pour into these younger players because they understand that everybody on their roster is important. Everybody can help everybody as long as we're working at the same level with the same intention of winning to be as successful as possible.
Yeah, that's good. So as a coach, trying to come in and you've got this dynamic where sometimes the players might be older than the coaches.
Yep.
Sometimes some players have more experience than coaches. Um, talk about the talk about that because most people always have this perception that, oh yeah, the coach is up here, the player is here, and in NFL, it's a little bit different. Like that player may say, no, you don't have the credentials to coach me. I do what I do, and you can just sit there and watch film, but you don't get to critique me. Like that's reality, isn't it? In some situations.
It's a very harsh reality, and especially as strength coaches, because we don't, again, as I mentioned before, we don't control playing time, we don't control roster moves. And so when you're looking at the NFL, it's 32 different teams with 32 different models. And so how one organization operates might be completely different. It's tied back to our conversation about those high performance models before. It's what kind of not necessarily credibility, but what kind of support do you have from those other people that are part of that high performance model? What kind of support do you have from your head coach? What kind of support do you have from your GM? And so when everything is aligned, now as you're talking to these players, you're also understanding that, again, this is an interview each and every day. You're coming from so many different places. You're essentially selling your program to these players each and every day. And what I mean by that, now with the transfer portal, you can get a player that comes from college that might have had 2 or 3 different strength coaches. Well, then they've gone to their combine training. Well, then they might have another, trainer on the side. So they might have been exposed to 5 or 6 different people before they even get to you. And so now they're going to look at you like, well, what's different from you and such and such guy? At one point when and I say when you and I were kind of younger strength coaches, you knew you were going to have a player for 3, 4, 5 years. So you're going to be able to have a true relationship with them. But then for that player, when he got to the NFL, he would have only had one strength coach. But now with the transfer portal, with the popularity of combine training, the growth of these private training facilities, these players can be overwhelmed with information. And so now you're just trying to help them understand what it takes to be and to train and work like a professional. And so to your point about that age level, that the experience, it's now goes into that sports psych side of servant leadership. You're trying to help them understand that at the end of the day, I'm humble enough to help you and serve you to be the best player possible. We can sit down and talk through a constructed plan to educate you about your body, because it's not just about how you feel, but it's understanding the long-term development that if you're always feeling good when you're training, then there's probably no development or no growth going on. So we have to make sure that we're giving them the information that they need to feel comfortable with our knowledge base, but also giving them what they need from a training standpoint to help them understand the longevity of playing in an NFL season.
Coach, I love that. So I got one last question for you, and then I want to turn it over to you to close everything out, and you can share whatever you want to share. And um, so, in terms of certification, because you've worked college, high school, pro, um, in terms of being certified to be a strength and conditioning coach, do you feel that you need different certifications to be a strength coach for pro, high school, or college? Or is the general certifications that are out there good enough? And now you've got to adapt outside of that certification at these different levels, or has high school picked up enough, has professional, I would say, been stable enough, and has college been flexible enough to bridge that gap where, man, you when it got certified, you're good to go. That certification will work. Training high school, training college, training professional. Of course, you have to have a different set of soft skills to deal with those different levels. Is that a clear question for you, or do I
Yeah,
need to?
no,
Okay.
absolutely. Because and it's funny you brought up the question because for so long until the recent NFL CBA, NFL head strength coaches didn't have to be certified. And so now that, and you're talking about one of the premier sport never had to be certified, but now that you have to be certified, a certification is one part of the equation. But as you said, being adaptable to knowing these individual athletes is more important than all those other certifications can ever give you. Because what we know about certifications and from a research standpoint, books are good, but research articles are constantly coming out because we know that research is always constantly evolving. So while I might not have X amount of certifications, I know that as long as I stay on top of my research, then I'm staying up to date on whatever information is being published and being distributed from a sports performance standpoint.
Yeah, that's good, man. Well, you got anything to close us out? What you want the people to hear?
I just think that we can't take for granted the importance of player coach relationships. Kind of talking about that NFLPA survey. It was unfortunate, but I also understand and I appreciate it because it helps me understand and reflect back on those components of trust, character, and competence. And so those are two things we should never take for granted from anyone that we're ever interacting with, regardless of age and or level, because just because you have the competence doesn't mean you have the character. Vice versa, just because you have the character doesn't mean you have the competence. And so when you find the individual that displays both of those, then that person is more than capable of being a leader and being able to serve you and help you accomplish the goals that you want to be in as a player.
Coach, that's strong. I appreciate your time. Once again, this part two just flew by. I
Yeah.
appreciate this conversation. Man, you got so much energy and passion. I just want to see you continue to live out your dreams and make the impact on young people, because I know we need people like you. So keep up the good work, stay encouraged, um, keep taking care of yourself. That's longevity in this field is about taking care of yourself, and you pour out. So make sure you keep finding ways to recharge. And I just want to say thank you. I appreciate everything you've done for the profession, and man, you're definitely a beacon of light. And if anybody's out there, how can they find you?
I'm not a social media guy, but I am. I use my email. I make sure that I respond to people that reach out to me because when I was a young strength coach, I always reached out and I want to be that service, as you said, to our profession. My email address is testallworth@yahoo.com. That's my personal email address, and I'm always open to talk shop about any and everything. I don't have all the answers, so I can learn from people that I talk to, but I know that I've had 20 years of experience in different sectors on different levels with different players that might be able to help someone navigate the situation that they're in.
Yeah. Well, appreciate your time, and take him up on that. He really means it. He wants to help you, and you never know what can happen through that sort of connection and that network. So, Coach, appreciate your time.
No problem. Appreciate you, Coach.